Welcome to the Empowered Team Podcast. I'm your host, Kari Schneider, and today, it's a big one. I have done the grand opening for Wick Cliff Lodge, and upon reflection, oh my goodness, over the last 6 years, I've learned so much. I'm going to boil it down to 3 things. Let me guide you in here with one of the grossest parts of the journey. Year 1, it was about 5 degrees outside, and I had spent hours, and then it turned into days, trying to take this gorgeous jug. It was about 20 liters, like one of these old wine or vinegar jugs, porcelain, big, going to be a statement piece, this gorgeous thing to use in the lake house as a decoration, a conversation piece. Yet when I went to clean it up and bring it into the lake house, which was the only building that I could use as an Airbnb to bring in income while I was doing construction and restoration projects on all of the other buildings for this Wick Cliff Lodge. And I wanted this one piece. I had found it on the property. I was cleaning it up, but it stunk. It stunk like something rotten. It stunk like something dead. And I thought, what on earth? And there's a small hole at the top of the jug and a large vessel of a jug. So something was in there. I'm thinking a small animal, maybe a mouse. And so I put soap and water in there. I put bleach in there. I let it soak. I swished it around. I dumped it. I did this over and over, and it still was just not smelling right. And I let it dry out a bit and then did it again, only to discover 2 little mouse carcasses came out, and they were long dead, like long dead, little skeletons. And then I realized, I thought, okay, good. But then it still stunk. I couldn't tell what was going on. And I went through this process probably 5 different times until I probably had, I don't know, 15 little mouse carcasses that came out of there. And it was a disgusting process, and it had a real reality check. And the reason I'm leading in with this is that when you start something that's an incredible far vision, I talk about now vision, next vision, and far vision. Well, the purchasing of this property was all about this far vision, what I could see it could become. And in the moments of the now, in the moments of reality was competing really hard with my far vision. Reality was a real smack in the face. And I really didn't understand what I was getting into, and yet I still hung on to that far vision. So your vision versus reality is a big deal. It's a really big deal. And it's often going to give you a bit of a smack in the face. So what happened for me, I signed a deal on paper with my father. My father had bought this property in 1988. Gorgeous spot where all these little cabins look out onto the water, but they look out onto the water in different positions because it's in a bay and on a point, and they're all unique. So it's just such a gem of a property, a gem of a location. And these cute little cabins had just been run down over many years. And I'd gone through all kinds of different possibilities of maybe leasing the property and starting a business, maybe waiting or having it willed over to me, or me being put on title. And my dad would never do any of these, even though he'd talk about them, but he would never actually do them. So eventually I ended up buying it for fair market value after I sold my other business. And stepping into it, not knowing what the costs would be exactly, and not knowing what was going to come up along the way, but having an idea and a plan of how I wanted to execute along the way. So the deal on paper and what your vision is and what actually happens are 2 different things. The reality is a big deal. So maybe this lodge, this Wick Cliff Lodge, and what I thought it could become versus what it was when I was first starting, Maybe that's your business. Maybe that's your marriage. Maybe that's a project that you're working on, something that you're rebuilding. Somewhere in there, you're asking yourself, what do I want this to be and what's the reality? And what I discovered in signing that deal is that I was still, because it used to be my father's and I had this history of growing up with this property, I had still this desire for approval from him. And the desire for approval from someone else, the previous owner, was impairing or affecting or influencing how I was showing up on the work site. And that work that I was putting in and the decisions I was making, I was looking for this approval, and the approval was coming from two spots that I was looking for. One was from my father because he used to own it and he was very critical on what my intention was with the property, what I wanted to do. And rightly so. He had owned the property since into the 80s and had done amazing things to it, but really it had been sitting for a couple of decades with not much going on. And there was a lot of work that needed to be done. And then the second one was my partner, my marital partner. We were going to do this together. And it turned out that a lot of the time, the majority of the time, I was doing it on my own and I was on the site on my own. And somewhere along the way, you might still be looking for approval or trying to please someone else within the dynamic of whatever the situation you're in, whether it's a project, whether it's your business, whether it's a partnership. And I want you to ask yourself, this is the first real lesson because this made a huge difference for me. Ask yourself, if that person wasn't involved, what would my decision be? And it doesn't mean you're going to change your decision, but it means that you have a greater perspective and an understanding of what you would do differently if that person wasn't involved. And what I realized is that if I had bought this particular property from a stranger, how would I have conducted my decisions and my actions differently than having bought it from my father? Same thing when it came to working in partnership with my husband. If I was doing this project alone, what would I be deciding differently and acting differently if it was on my own? Now, it doesn't mean your action or your decision is going to be different, but having the perspective is extremely powerful so you can see whether there's a difference or whether you would do everything the same, whether you are on your own or with a partner. Now, the reality is that I didn't have to get approval from my father in any way. I bought it legally and fair. And yet I still was so concerned about him wanting to like, him approving, him thinking that the things I was doing were good. And it was influencing me at the time. All right. So whatever you're working on, look at that contrast, what your vision was, what the reality is, and how you are influenced along the way by those you are with. That's something that when I reflected on this, it was a really powerful lesson for myself and my learning. All right, the second part, when we go into this, it's one of the really expensive lessons. And the expensive lesson here, it could have been financial, but it wasn't as much financial as it was energetic. For me, I started to learn how to listen to my gut more instead of listening to what other people were saying, what other people thought I should do, but rather listening to my gut. There were situations with contractors who were very, very strong-willed, contractors who were determined that this needed to be how this needed to be done, that this color needed to be put onto the logs, that this is the way that we needed to strip or treat them. And I wasn't going into anything blind. I'd done a lot of research and asked a lot of questions from a lot of different people in order to make the decisions that I was doing. So when I had a gut feeling about something, it wasn't just from some level of, it came to me. It came to me because I had done some looking, some research, and also been working with these particular buildings for a long time. And the cost, when I wasn't listening to my own gut, was my own energy and my own attention. And that's more costly than anything, than any financial value. Your gut doesn't ask for permission to be right. What it's doing when I say your gut, your whole nervous system is watching. Your nervous system is watching people, watching scenarios, gathering information, and then getting a feel for whether this is the thing or the way to go or not. And it's expensive when you don't listen to it because it becomes draining to your whole system, your whole body, when you're not listening to that gut feeling. And for me, I had been in situations where I was being told by people who weren't in the situation. I was being guided by people who I wanted their approval, and it was costing me energy. And by doing that, I was slowing the process simply by trying to convince them of my position, convince them of the things that I had learned, convince them, and it was exhausting for me. I remember one situation where somebody was telling me exactly the steps that the contractor should take. They were telling me the sequence of events that should happen. They were telling me what was really important to do. And in the moment, I really wanted to listen to this person because they were really important to me in my life. And yet I realized that, wait a second, they don't know the contractor. They don't know what's led up to this situation. They don't know what the next steps are going to be on that particular build. Not only that, they haven't even seen the entire step-by-step or that project or the thing that we're talking about. And so for me, it would be a waste of my energy to try and describe all of that to them in order to change their mind about what they're advising me to do. And yet that's what I was doing a few times, a few too many times, and I realized how much it cost me in my energy. The break in here, and when I say the break, I mean it's the break away from other people's opinions. It's the break away from other people's approval. And for me, one of the hardest breaks was over a year ago, over a year before the grand opening, that I was learning fully that my marriage was over. And this project that we had gone into together, it was supposed to be for us and for our future and next stages of life. It was very different because we were ending a marriage. So I didn't know fully what was going to happen. So I had to break free from being tied to this being with someone else. And I didn't even know yet what was going to happen with the property and how things were going to play out in the separation and the division of assets and things like that. But here's what I learned, that I had the option of just stopping, not continuing forward with the work that needed to be done. But to me, that wasn't an option. Quitting wasn't an option. Breaking free from other people's opinions, breaking free from other people's approval, that was really important. It was a very expensive lesson on my time and energy and attention, but quitting wasn't an option, and continuing to move forward and continuing to take action was not the expensive part. It was being busy trying to convince other people or trying to get other people's approval when it really wasn't warranted. That was the expensive part. So that was a huge lesson. That's the second takeaway. Here's the third. The third, if the first was really about building and understanding the vision versus reality, and the second one is really about breaking free from other people's opinions. Doesn't mean you're breaking free from the relationship. Doesn't mean that you don't value that person. It means their opinions, their approval, those things, breaking away from that. Then this really builds into becoming. So this is all about reclaiming. reclaiming the ownership, owning the action, owning the situation. What I've discovered in the 6 years that it's taken to get to a grand opening, the 6 years of taking a lodge, 5 small cabins, a lake house, a wash house, building brand new buildings, and that was after tearing down 2 buildings. So brand new construction, restoration of old 80-year-old log buildings. What I've discovered along this is that the actual vision is typically so magnificent, especially when it's years away and years in the making. The vision is something that you're really clinging to, believing in. But what if there's so much more possible than the vision that you were convincing yourself was there all the way along? There is so much more possible. And when you go into it, a lot of times, whether it's your business, an amazing bucket list vacation, a relationship, a lot of times you go into it and your vision seems so magnificent that there's really no room for you to believe that more can be possible than what you've had in your magnificent vision. And here's the truth. The truth is that there's infinite possibilities. There's so much more available than what your limited vision could provide for you. And yet, when you created the vision, you thought it was so infinite, so magnificent, and yet it was limited. There's so much more possible than your vision is offering you right now. Open yourself to that possibility. And when you're open enough to go through something, being compelled by your own vision, then you're going to be open enough. It's important to be open enough to be able to see that there's more than just what your vision was offering you. There's so much more available to you. Keep in mind that Wick Cliff Lodge, this beautiful project, this incredible space, this place that I've had such vision of people being able to have nature as a requirement for high performance. Not just a bonus, but a requirement. Have something that allows them to reconnect to themselves, potentially to heal, reconnect with others, create the space and beauty of creativity, whether it's leadership strategy and having a location for a corporate retreat, or whether it's people just being able to have space to get back together with each other. It's a beautiful vision, and I believe so strongly in it. And yet, it went from this rough fishing hunting camp to something solid, something sustainable, something functional, something elevated. Not just what happened to the property. That's the process that I went through too in order to see this vision through for Wick Cliff Lodge. That's what happened to me as well. And I promise you that as you release the need for approval, as you release the importance on other people's opinion, as you start to accept that reality can be very, very different than the vision, as you start to go through these processes, you will start to see that you, along the process, are becoming something so much more than who you were when you originally had the vision itself. It's a really transformative process. It's something that no one can fully prepare you for. You can only go through it with the experience that you have along the way. And the challenges, it sounds so cliche, but every challenge is your opportunity to grow. Every challenge creates this stretch within you that has you have to become something different than you were. That silly story about me cleaning out that antique jug, it was part of my vision. And yet my vision, the part of my vision was finding these great treasures and putting them into decorating this gorgeous environment. Like, that was the vision. The vision had nothing to do with cleaning out with bleach and day after day soap and water carcasses that had gotten into this jug. Like, there's no, animal death wasn't in my vision. It was not there. Rotting animals was not in my vision. Yet who I had to become, the vision was more important than what I had to go through to get there. The end game was more important than those challenges, those hiccups along the way that I didn't like. I did not like. But I can promise you this, go back to a recent episode of you may not like it, but you want it. I wanted the outcome so much that I could go through those things that I didn't like, the things that were not preferences for me. I could go through the harder parts in order to get to that vision outcome that I was after. And what I didn't know, that those hard parts were so freaking valuable. They were the things that were having me grow and stretch into becoming the resilient person. And trust me, going into this project, I was already resilient. I had already been through so many different things. I was already gritty. I was already tough. I was already strong. However, there's often a different stretch, a different growth, a different type of strength that you don't know you needed. You don't know could expand you. You don't know was so important for your next level or your expansion or your elevation, whatever your journey is, your growth, your next profit zone, whatever it is for you. So you have a version of Wick Cliff Lodge. What is your version of this project? You have a version. You don't need someone else's context-free advice. You need to trust you, the person who created the vision, the person who is actually there for every decision. That's probably you. So if there's something to be learned from my experience, it's self-trust. It's becoming the person that you can rely on and trust yourself the most. It doesn't mean you don't value other people's opinions. It doesn't mean you don't value them so much. But what it means is that you learn to value your own gut, your own expertise, your own ability to gather information. You learn to trust that even more because you're going to learn the failures. You're going to learn from the mistakes. And they're not going to be easy. And yet you're going to be better for it. So much better for it. So yeah, we had a grand opening. We had a grand opening just a few days ago. And it was so warm and fun. And the weather held. And people came out who might have experienced this particular property and this lodge. They might have experienced it decades ago. They have core memories that they've made here. And for them to have seen the transformation was heartwarming. It was beautiful. There were other people who had never been here, and I invited them to go out and find their favorite spot, find a place that really is meaningful to them for whatever reason. Maybe they like the view. Maybe they love the rustic cabin. Maybe they love the possibility of being in nature, or going fishing, or having some adventures, or getting out on the water. And I invited them to explore in nature. And that, right there, in that grand opening, I was realizing a vision. It was the grand opening was the epiphany of reality and the vision coming together at once. And there is nothing like it. Nothing like it. And the reason I'm offering you some of the lessons that I've gone through is because I want you to have that experience. I want you to have the experience of when reality and the vision come together. And that's what the grand opening was. I've described to you earlier in this podcast of how there were massive differences between reality and the vision. And that happened over and over and over and over again. But the rare thing, this beautiful thing, is when vision and reality come together, and that's what happened. It was this culmination of acknowledging the contractors who saw the vision and kept pulling through, kept showing up, kept offering their expertise, their belief, their work toward the vision. Acknowledging those contractors, then going into celebrating, going into this grand opening experience. And it all was part of a vision. And seeing it happen was surreal. Now, this isn't my first rodeo. I've opened other businesses. I've opened my first in 2006. So this is 20 years later after opening my very first business. My first grand opening was 2006, in March of 2006. So here in July of 2026, having this beautiful experience again, having reality meeting the vision, it is surreal. And it's a incredible, valuable experience. So I hope that for you, no matter what it is, whether it is a weight loss goal, whether it is a family goal, whether it is a vision for your business, a vision for your future, seeing it come together and having the presence of mind to be able to appreciate it in the moment is a beautiful thing. And that's what I hope you can get to in whatever area you want in your life or your business. And part of the way that you'll be able to get there is seeing the differences between reality and your vision along the way. So I hope you can use these insights that I've offered from my experience and do something for yourself like I did. Have something go toward and grow into solid, sustainable, functional, and elevated, and have yourself evolve into that exactly along the way as well, because you have to become it as you are creating it. All right. Share this with someone who is going through some sort of process, getting towards their vision, because they may need to hear this. They'll need all the help they can get. If it's a worthy vision, it's probably a worthy journey, and it might be kind of tough. Share this. Enjoy your week. Keep going at it. Stay empowered.